Chapter 1, The Symphony of Two Strokes. The sun was dipping low over the skyline of the city, painting the asphalt in shades of bruised purple and gold. To the residents of the high-rises, the sound was a nuisance, a high-pitched, angry whine that rattled windows and interrupted dinner conversations. But to 16-year-old Max, it was a symphony. It was the sound of freedom, calibrated in cc's and cooled by the wind. "Check the spark plug, Max. You're sounding a little raspy, like you've been smoking cigarettes since the 3rd grade," Leo shouted over the idle of his Yamaha. Leo was the heart of the crew. If it had an engine and a piston, he could make it purr. He was currently covered in more grease than a deep fryer, but he wore it like war paint. Max kicked his bike into gear, the vibration traveling through his boots and up his spine. Around him were 17 of his closest brothers. Among them were Dante, already pulling a practice balance point, and Jax, who was currently trying to eat a chili dog while wearing a full-face helmet, a feat that was more tragic than comedic. "We hitting the bypass tonight?" Dre asked, his GoPro already strapped to his chest like a third eye. Dre was the historian. If he didn't film it, the wheelie didn't happen. "You know it," Max said, grinning behind his goggles. "Mayor Wilkes put out a statement this morning calling us urban locusts. I think the locusts need to go for a fly." They took off in a formation that looked like organized chaos. For Max, this wasn't about breaking the law, it was about the weightlessness. When the front tire left the ground, the stress of the neighborhood, the looming shadow of his mother's illness, and the pressure of being a teenager vanished. For a few miles, they weren't delinquents. They were pilots. They wove through the streets, the smell of two-stroke oil trailing behind them like incense. It was the only time Max felt like the world couldn't catch him. Chapter 2, The Blue and White Shadow. The peace never lasted long in a city that preferred its streets quiet and its youth invisible. Just as the pack hit the long stretch near the industrial district, a place where the only witnesses were abandoned warehouses, the first flash of blue and red reflected off Max's mirrors. "Scatter!" Max yelled, his voice cracking slightly under the sudden spike of adrenaline. He didn't really need to say it, the group split like a deck of cards thrown into a hurricane. This was the dance they performed 3 times a week. The police cruisers were heavy, loud, and restricted by curbs and gravity. The bikes, however, were nimble spirits. Max watched Manny take a sharp turn into a vacant lot, his tires kicking up a rooster tail of dirt that blinded the pursuing officer for a split second. "Whoop whoop." Jax's voice came over the helmet comms, punctuated by a giggle. "Officer friendly behind me has a very angry mustache. I think he wants an autograph." Max didn't laugh. He saw the cruiser's bumper getting dangerously close to Jax's rear tire. He pivoted his own bike, revving the engine to a deafening scream to draw the officer's attention. It was a risky move, but Max couldn't let his friends face the harsh penalties Wilkes had been pushing for, impound fees that cost more than the bikes, and records that followed them into job interviews. He led the cruiser on a 3-block chase, hopping a curb and disappearing into a narrow alleyway that was barely wide enough for a bicycle, let alone a Ford Explorer. When he emerged on the other side, the sirens were a distant echo. He met the crew at their safe zone, under the bridge. They were laughing, high on the rush, but Max looked at his shaking hands. The thrill was starting to feel like a countdown. Chapter 3, Empty Helmets. The atmosphere changed the next morning with a single phone call that made the sunny kitchen feel like a walk-in freezer. Max was trying to burn some toast for Momma when Leo's voice came through the speaker, sounding hollow and wrong. "It's Kaleb, Max." He was out late. He wasn't even doing anything crazy, just riding home. A hit and run on 4th Street. The car didn't even stop. The toast popped up, forgotten. Kaleb. The one who always had an extra liter of oil. The one who promised to teach Max how to 360 by the end of the summer. The kid with the loudest laugh and the cleanest bike in the city. Max walked into his mother's room, his feet feeling like they were made of lead. Momma was propped up on pillows, her hair wrapped in a colorful silk scarf to hide the patches from the chemotherapy. She saw his face and reached out a thin, trembling hand. "He's gone, Momma," Max whispered, collapsing into the chair by her bed. Kaleb is gone. And the local news is already calling him a motorized delinquent instead of a kid who just wanted to get home. They're talking about the nuisance of the bike instead of the boy who was riding it. Momma stroked his hair, her touch the only thing keeping him from floating away into grief. The world only sees the dust you kick up, Max, she said softly. They don't see the boy under the helmet. They don't see the heart. If you want them to see you, you have to stop running and make them look. Max stayed there for hours, his head in her lap, listening to the rhythmic, labored sound of her breathing. Two people he loved were fighting for their lives, and he felt like he was just spinning his wheels in the dirt. Chapter 4, The 6 o'clock News. A week later, Max was sitting in a plastic chair in room 402 of the city hospital. The air smelled of bleach and citrus-scented floor wax. Momma was having what the doctors called a weak day. She was awake, but her spirit seemed to be flickering like a candle in a drafty room. Turn on the news, Max, she said, her voice a raspy ghost of itself. I want to see if the rain is coming. Max clicked the remote. The local news logo flashed on the screen with its dramatic, synthesized music. Then, a breaking news banner appeared in bright, alarming red, tragedy on the expressway. Max's heart dropped into his stomach. The footage, shot from a news chopper, showed a mangled green Kawasaki. He knew that bike. He had helped Malik change the chain on that bike just 3 days ago. Another one, Max breathed, his eyes glued to the screen. The reporter was standing near the yellow police tape, talking about illegal activities and reckless endangerment. They showed a picture of Malik, a grainy photo from social media where he was scowling to look tough, rather than the photo of him smiling at his graduation. He looked at Momma. She was watching the screen, tears swimming in her eyes, her face a mask of sorrow. 2 boys in 2 weeks, Max, she said, a sudden, fierce strength returning to her voice. And here I am, stuck in this bed. You're out there running from the law like you're the villain of the story. Is this how it ends? Just names on a news ticker and empty chairs at the table? Max felt a hot spark of anger ignite in his chest. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was a realization. The city didn't care about Malik or Kaleb because they had no place to go. No park. No track. No voice. Chapter 5, A Bold Declaration. I'm going to change it, Max said. The words felt bigger than the hospital room. They felt bigger than him. Momma tilted her head, a small smile playing on her lips. Change what, baby? The oil in that bike? No, Max said, standing up and pacing the small square of linoleum. The way they see us. The way this city works. Mayor Wilkes keeps saying he wants to clean up the streets. Fine. Let's clean them up by giving us a place to belong. He thinks he can just arrest the problem away, but he's just making more ghosts. Max looked out the hospital window at the sprawling city below. I'm graduating next month. I was gonna go to tech school, but Momma, Wilkes is running for re-election. He's got no opponent except some guy who wants to ban loud music in the parks. He's running unopposed because nobody thinks they can beat him. Momma started to chuckle, which turned into a cough, then back into a smile. Max, are you saying what I think you're saying? You're 18 in 3 weeks. You're barely out of high school. I'm running, Momma. I'm running for mayor. He expected her to tell him he was dreaming. He expected her to say he was too young, too poor, or too locust-like. Instead, she grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. You can do this, son. I believe in you. You've been leading those 17 boys since you were 10 years old. You know how to keep a pack together when things get rough. Now, you just have to lead the rest of the city. But Max? You're gonna need a better tie. Chapter 6, The Garage Convention. Max's campaign headquarters wasn't a glass-walled office downtown, it was Leo's grease-stained garage. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and old pizza boxes. 17 bikes were parked in a jagged semicircle, their chrome glinting under the flickering fluorescent lights. You want to do what? Dante asked, dropping a socket wrench that clattered loudly against the concrete. Max, you're 16 today. In 2 weeks, you're 18. You can't even buy a lottery ticket without your cousin, and you want to run a city? The city charter is clear, Max said, pulling a crumpled stack of library printouts from his backpack. Any resident over 18 can hold office. I turn 18 before the filing deadline. It's tight, but it's legal. Wilkes is running unopposed because everyone is scared of his bank account. But he doesn't have what we have. Jack started laughing so hard he nearly tipped his milk crate. Mayor Max. Imagine the inauguration. Instead of a limo, you just roll up on a back tire doing a 12 o'clock wheelie. The Secret Service is gonna need dirt bikes. The laughter was contagious, but it died down when Max stepped into the center of the garage. Kaleb is gone, Jax. Malik is gone. Wilkes wants to impound our bikes and put us in cages because he thinks we're a nuisance. If we don't sit at the table, we're on the menu. I'm not asking you to vote, I'm asking you to help me build a city that doesn't want us dead. The room went quiet. Leo was the first to step forward, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm in. But you're gonna look like a clown in a suit, Max. No suits, Max said firmly. We're doing this our way. Street Legal. Chapter 7, The Clip That Went Viral. The campaign didn't start with expensive TV ads or glossy brochures. It started with Dre and his GoPro. They spent 3 days filming Max riding through the neighborhood, not doing stunts, but pointing out the realities of their world. My name is Max, he said to the camera, standing in front of a boarded-up community center where the windows were jagged teeth of glass. Mayor Wilkes calls us a problem. I call us a community without a home. He spent $100,000 on no dirt bike signs last year. That's enough to fund this center for 3 years. Dre edited the footage with a heavy bass beat, mixing shots of Max's serious face with clips of the boys helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or fixing a kid's bicycle. They didn't hide the bikes, they made them the centerpiece. Posted at midnight, Max instructed. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Max's phone was vibrating so hard it walked itself off the nightstand. The video had 10,000 views. By noon, it was 50,000. The comments were a battlefield. Half the city thought Max was a hero, the other half thought he was a sign of the apocalypse. Manny ran into the hospital room later that day, waving his phone. Max. Look. The local news just shared the video. They're calling you the motorized candidate. Even the old people in the comments are arguing about whether you have a point about the community centers. Momma watched the video from her bed, a small, proud smile on her face. You've got them talking, Max. Now you just have to make them listen. Chapter 8, The Town Hall Terror. Max's first public appearance was at a town hall meeting hosted by Mayor Wilkes. The room was filled with older residents in beige sweaters who looked like they hadn't seen a dirt bike since the invention of the wheel. Mayor Wilkes stood at the podium, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his voice smooth as silk. We must reclaim our streets from these motorized hoodlums, Wilkes declared, to thunderous applause. They are a stain on our quiet neighborhoods. Max stood up in the back row. He was wearing his best flannel shirt and clean jeans. Mr. Mayor? I have a question. The room turned as one. Wilkes squinted through his glasses, his smile tightening. Yes, young man? Are you lost? The skate park is 3 blocks over. No, sir. I'm exactly where I need to be, Max said, his voice steady despite his knocking knees. You say we're a stain. But you closed the youth centers. You cut the after-school budgets. You took away every place we had to go, and then you're surprised when we're out on the street. Why is it cheaper to hate us than to help us? The silence was deafening. Wilkes chuckled condescendingly. Son, when you pay taxes and have a mortgage, we can talk. Until then, stay off the sidewalks. I'll see you at the debates then, Max replied, stepping into the aisle. Since I'm on the ballot as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. Max walked out to the sound of hushed whispers and Jax's muffled, "Let's go," from the hallway. Chapter 9, The Hospital Gala. Campaigning was exhausting. Max spent his mornings at school, his afternoons at the hospital, and his nights at the garage. Momma's condition was fluctuating, some days she was sharp and full of fire, other days she drifted in a fog of medication. To cheer her up, the boys decided to bring the campaign gala to her. They couldn't bring the bikes into the ward, so Jax dressed up in a tuxedo that was clearly 3 sizes too small, looking like a stuffed penguin, while Leo brought a tray of high-end snacks, mostly fancy crackers and spray cheese. Speech. Speech. Dante chanted, holding a plastic water bottle like a microphone. Max stood by Momma's 4-pole, looking at the small, "Max for Mayor" button pinned to her hospital gown. If elected, Max began, his voice softening, "I promise to make hospital food taste like actual food. And I promise that every mother in this city will get to see her son do something great, even if he has to do it on one wheel." Momma laughed, clutching her side. "You've got my vote, Mr. Mayor. Just don't forget the little people when you're in the big office." But as the boys joked and Jax tried to dance with a confused nurse, Max noticed the doctor's concerned look near the door. The joy was a thin layer of ice over a very deep pond. He realized he wasn't just running for a park anymore, he was running against time. He needed her to see him win. Chapter 10, The Sabotage. The momentum was building, but Mayor Wilkes wasn't going down without a fight. He knew he couldn't beat Max on social media, so he decided to hit him where it hurt, the bikes. 2 days before the first big youth rally, Leo's garage was raided by a special task force, led by the city's code enforcement. "They took them, Max," Leo said, his voice trembling with rage as Max pulled up on his bicycle. The garage doors were slapped with bright orange, condemned as stickers. Every single one. They said the garage wasn't zoned for mechanical repairs. They towed the bikes to the city impound lot. Even yours. Max stood in the empty driveway, looking at the oil stains on the pavement. This was Wilkes's way of saying stay in your lane. Without the bikes, the movement lost its heart. Without the bikes, they were just kids on the sidewalk again. "He thinks he won," Max said, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the downtown skyline. "He thinks the bikes are the movement. He thinks we need the engines to have a voice." He turned to Dre, who was already holding his camera. "Get the crew. We're going to the impound lot. We aren't going to break in. We're going to stand at the gates and invite the press. If Wilkes wants to show the city he's afraid of a few teenagers with wrenches, let's give him a front row seat." The motorized candidate was about to go on foot, and Max realized that sometimes, you have to lose your ride to find your path. Chapter 11, The Debate Stage. The City Hall auditorium was packed, smelling of old wood and nervous sweat. On the left sat Mayor Wilkes, draped in a charcoal suit that cost more than Max's house. On the right sat Max, wearing a clean hoodie with "A Ride for Change" printed across the chest. He looked like a David facing a very well-funded Goliath. "The challenger," Wilkes began, his voice dripping with mock pity, "is a child. He wants to turn our peaceful parks into noisy, dangerous playgrounds for delinquents. He thinks a city is run on adrenaline and stunts." Max waited for the booing to die down. He didn't look at the crowd, he looked at the camera Dre was holding in the front row. "Mayor Wilkes calls it a playground for delinquents. I call it a sanctuary. When we ride, we aren't on the corners. We aren't in trouble. We're together, learning how to fix what's broken." Max leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "You say we're the problem, but you closed the youth centers. You cut the after-school budgets. You took away every place we had to go, and then you're surprised when we're out on the street. We didn't choose the streets, you left us nothing else." The audience shifted. A few people in the back started nodding. Max wasn't just talking about dirt bikes anymore, he was talking about the soul of the city. Wilkes looked at his notes, his face turning a shade of red that matched the stop signs he loved so much. For the first time, the mayor looked worried. Chapter 12, The Hospital Vigil. The high of the debate crashed when Max arrived at the hospital that night. The hallway was too quiet. He found Leo, Dante, and Jack sitting in the waiting room, their usual boisterous energy replaced by a heavy, suffocating stillness. "She had a bad reaction to the new treatment," Leo whispered, his eyes red. "The doctors are in there now." Max felt like the floor had turned into water. He walked to the window of Momma's room. She looked so small under the white sheets, surrounded by the rhythmic humming and clicking of machines that were keeping her anchored to the world. He thought about the campaign, the park, and the speeches. It all felt like a joke if she wasn't there to see it. He sat on the floor in the hallway and put his head in his hands. A moment later, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Jack's. He didn't crack a joke. He just sat down next to him. Then Dante. Then Leo. One by one, the crew sat on the cold tile, forming a perimeter around their leader. "We're not moving, Max," Dante said, his voice firm. "The bike's on the kickstand. We're staying right here until she wakes up." In that moment, Max realized that his pack was more than a biker crew, they were the family he had built out of grease and grit. Chapter 13, The Blueprint of a Dream. 3 days later, Momma woke up. She was weak, her voice a mere shadow of its former self, but her first words were, "Did you win yet?" Max laughed through his tears, clutching her hand. "Not yet, Momma. But I'm working on it." To keep his mind busy while he sat by her bed, Max began to draw. He wasn't an architect, but he knew what a perfect ride felt like. He sketched out a massive complex with dirt trails, a paved stunt lot, and a mechanical shop where kids could learn to fix engines. It wasn't just a track, it was a career center. "I'm gonna call it Ameliorate 3X, Max told her, showing her the notebook. "That's a big word for a boy who used to eat dirt for a hobby," Momma teased, her eyes twinkling. "It means to make something better," Max explained. "The 3X is for the 3 things we lost, Kaleb, Malik, and the peace we used to have. It's not just a park, it's a way to heal. I want to hire the riders to build it. We'll show them we aren't just locusts. We're builders." He showed the drawings to the nurses and the janitors. By the end of the shift, the hospital staff wasn't just checking Momma's vitals, they were asking where they could sign the petition to get the park on the city budget. Chapter 14, The Final Push. Election day was a week away. The polls showed Max and Wilkes in a dead heat. The city was divided down the middle. The old guard feared the noise and the change, while the new generation hungered for a voice they had never been given. Max organized one final rally. He didn't have his bike, it was still locked in the city impound lot, so he walked. He walked from his house to the city square, and as he moved, people began to join him. It started with his 17 friends, but by the 3rd block, it was 50 people. By the 10th, it was 500. "Wilkes says I'm too young to lead," Max shouted into a megaphone at the square, standing on the base of a statue. "Maybe I am. But I'm old enough to bury my friends. I'm old enough to watch my mother fight for her life. And I'm old enough to know that this city deserves a leader who loves its people more than its parking tickets." The crowd roared. From a distance, Max saw a black SUV with tinted windows. He knew Wilkes was watching. The urban locusts had become a tidal wave, and there wasn't a no dirt bike sign in the world that could stop them now. Chapter 15, The Longest Night. The night before the election was the hardest. Max stayed at the hospital, holding Momma's hand while the city outside buzzed with anticipation. The silence of the room was heavy with the things they didn't say. "I'm scared, Momma," Max admitted in the dark, his voice small. "What if I lose? What if I let everyone down, and Kaleb and Malik were lost for nothing?" Momma squeezed his hand. Her voice was a raspy whisper, but it held the weight of a mountain. "You've already won, Max. Look at your friends. They aren't running from the police tonight. They're running a campaign. They're standing tall. You changed them before you ever stepped foot in City Hall. That's the real victory." Max looked out the window. Down in the parking lot, he could see the faint glow of cell phone lights. The crew was down there, keeping watch. They were tired, they were greasy, and they were his brothers. He realized then that leadership wasn't about the office or the title, it was about the people who stayed when the lights went out. Go to sleep, Mr. Mayor, Momma whispered. Tomorrow, the world changes. Max closed his eyes, the rhythm of the heart monitor sounding strangely like the steady, powerful idle of a dirt bike ready to fly. Chapter 16, The Ballot and the Breath. Election day arrived with a tension that made the air feel electric. Max stood in line at the local community center, his heart drumming against his ribs like a piston. For the first time in his life, he wasn't a spectator, he was the main event. The news crews were everywhere. Max, how does it feel to be the youngest candidate in history? A reporter shoved a microphone toward his face. Max looked directly into the camera lens. It feels like a responsibility. This isn't about me. It's about every kid who was told they don't belong in their own city. Back at the hospital, the crew had set up a war room in the cafeteria. Leo was refreshing the city's results page every 3 seconds, his fingers flying across his laptop. Jax was stress-eating a bag of powdered donuts, his face covered in white dust like he'd just come off a dirt track. We're up by 200 votes in the North District. Leo shouted, jumping onto a plastic chair. But by mid-afternoon, Wilkes's numbers surged. The old guard had turned out in droves. Max sat by Momma's bed, watching the red and blue bars on the TV screen dance back and forth. It's okay, baby, Momma whispered, her voice faint but steady. The seeds are already in the ground. You can't stop what's meant to grow. Chapter 17, The Youngest Mayor. The clock struck 11 p.m. The final precinct, Max's own neighborhood, reported its numbers. The screen froze for a second, a spinning icon testing everyone's nerves, then a photo of Max flashed with the word winner in bold, gold letters. The hospital cafeteria erupted. Max could hear his friends screaming from 3 floors down. Leo, Dante, and Jax burst into the room, tripping over their own feet in their rush to reach him. You did it. You actually did it. Jax yelled, throwing a handful of confetti he'd apparently been hiding in his pocket for weeks. Max felt a massive weight lift, replaced instantly by a terrifying new one. He looked at Momma. She couldn't speak much, but the pride in her eyes was louder than any engine. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, his eyes stinging. We got work to do, Mayor, Leo said, checking his watch with a grin. First order of business? Getting our bikes back from that impound lot. Max grinned. No. First order of business is drafting the proposal for the park. We don't wait for permission anymore. We are the permission. Chapter 18, The Keys to the City. Walking into City Hall as the mayor felt like entering a foreign country where Max didn't speak the language. The marble floors echoed with the sound of his sneakers, a sharp contrast to the polished leather shoes of the staffers who watched him with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Mr. Mayor, your 9 a.m. is here, the secretary said, looking over her glasses with a skeptical tilt of her head. It was Mayor Wilkes. He wasn't wearing his victory smile anymore. He looked tired, his suit suddenly appearing a size too large. He handed Max a heavy ring of keys and a stack of leather-bound folders. You think this is just about bikes, son? Wilkes said, his voice gravelly. It's about budgets, sewage, and angry phone calls at 3 a.m. because a street lamp is out. I'm used to late nights, Max replied, taking the keys. And I'm used to fixing things that people said were broken beyond repair. I've been doing it to engines since I was 10. A city is just a bigger machine. Wilkes paused at the door. Ameliorate 3x, it's a bold plan. But the city council will eat you alive if you don't show them the math. Max opened the first folder. Then I guess I better start calculating. Chapter 19, Ameliorate 3x, The Pitch. The city council meeting was Max's first true test. He stood at the front of the mahogany-paneled room with a professional-grade presentation that Dre had stayed up all night designing. Ameliorate 3x isn't just a park, Max told the stony-faced council members. It's a job training site. We will have a mechanical wing where youth can earn certifications in small engine repair. We'll have a media center for digital editing. We aren't just giving them a place to ride, we're giving them a reason to stay in school and a path to a career. He showed the projected decrease in illegal street riding and the potential revenue from hosting regional motocross events. And most importantly, Max's voice softened, it's a memorial. It's a place where no one has to die on a highway just to feel like they belong. The council president, a woman who had famously called for a total bike ban, looked at the blueprints. And who's going to build it, Mr. Mayor? Our budget is tight. We are, Max said, gesturing to the crew sitting in the gallery. The riders. The community. Give us the land, and we'll provide the sweat. Chapter 20, The Groundbreaking. June 2026. The old quarry at the edge of the city was no longer a dumping ground for rusted cars and broken glass. It was a hive of activity. Max stood on a mound of fresh dirt, wearing a hard hat over his ride for change cap. Beside him, Leo was directing a bulldozer, and Dante was helping a group of teenagers clear rocks for the main trail. The sound of construction was rhythmic and hopeful. The news crews were back, but the tone had changed. They weren't filming us delinquent anymore, they were filming a visionary. We are officially open for hiring. Max announced into a microphone, his voice echoing across the valley. If you want to be part of the construction team, the maintenance crew, or the coaching staff, join us. We're building more than trails today. We're building a future that belongs to all of us. As the crowd cheered, Max saw a medical transport van pull up to the edge of the site. The back doors opened, and a ramp lowered. It was Momma. She was in a wheelchair, hooked to a portable oxygen tank, but she was wearing a bright yellow staff shirt. Max ran over to her, his heart full. You're late for work, he joked, his eyes stinging. I had to make sure my hair was right for the cameras, she teased, taking his hand. Look at this, Max, look at what you did for them. Chapter 21, The Pressure of the Deadline. The heat of June 2026 was relentless, but the pace at the Ameliorate 3X construction site was even faster. Max was learning that being mayor meant being a professional firefighter. Every hour, a new fire broke out that required his attention. Max, the asphalt contractor, is backing out. Leo yelled over the roar of a generator. He looked exhausted, his face smeared with dust and sweat. They say the grade of the stunt lot is too steep for their equipment. They want to charge us double to re-engineer the slope. Max didn't panic. He walked over to the edge of the lot, looking at the blueprints. Tell them it's not too steep, they're just using the wrong approach. If they can't do it, I'll find a crew of bikers who can. We've been navigating steeper hills than this since we were 10. Between city council meetings and hospital visits, Max was running on fumes. The dark circles under his eyes were becoming permanent fixtures. But then he would look at the now hiring sign at the gate. Over 50 local kids had been hired to help landscape and build. They weren't on the streets, they were earning a paycheck and learning the value of a day's work. The vision was becoming a physical reality, one shovel of dirt at a time, and the city was starting to see the locusts as the builders they always had the potential to be. Chapter 22, The Grand Speech. The day of the grand opening arrived, and the city had never seen anything like it. Highways were temporarily shut down as a massive Unity ride led thousands of bikers toward the park. The sound wasn't a nuisance today, it was a celebration. Max stood on the main stage, looking out over a sea of helmets and smiling faces. He saw families, police officers, and even some of the old guard residents who had come to see what all the fuss was about. We were told we were a problem to be solved, Max said, his voice echoing through the PA system and vibrating in his chest. But we were just a community that needed a home. Ameliorate 3X is that home. It's a place to ride, a place to work, and a place to remember those who didn't get to see this day. He looked toward the front row, where a dedicated section of benches bore the names Kaleb and Malik in polished bronze. If you're looking for a future, if you're looking for a trade, or if you're just looking for a place to catch some air, welcome home. The gates are open. As the crowd roared, Max realized that he had done more than build a park, he had given the youth of the city a sense of ownership over their own lives. He wasn't just a rider anymore, he was a leader who had turned grief into groundbreaking change. Chapter 23, The Ribbon and the Tears. The most important guest sat in a decorated wheelchair at the center of the ribbon. Momma looked radiant, despite her frailty, wearing a bright silk scarf and a Mayor Max button. She held the giant golden scissors with Max's help, her hand trembling but her spirit unshakable. "You did it, Maxie," she whispered so only he could hear, her voice a soft breeze in the middle of the storm of cheers. "You changed the song of this city." As the ribbon fell, the crowd went wild. But as Max leaned down to hug her, he felt her grip loosen slightly. The adrenaline of the moment faded into a quiet, heavy realization. She had held on for this. She had fought her battle with cancer just long enough to see her son stand on the mountain he had built from the rubble of their neighborhood. The paramedics were on standby, and they moved in quietly as Momma's eyes fluttered closed. She wasn't gone yet, but she was tired. Max stayed by her side in the ambulance, the sounds of the dirt bikes roaring in the distance. He realized that leadership meant making sacrifices, but he had given her the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that her son, and his pack, were finally safe. Chapter 24, A Different Kind of Mayor. Months passed, and the seasons began to shift. The park became the heartbeat of the city. Crime rates among youth had dropped by 40%, and the Ameliorate mechanics program was being scouted by major automotive companies looking for new talent. Max sat in his office at City Hall. He still wore his sneakers, though he'd finally found a tie that didn't look like it was trying to choke him. On his desk sat a photo of the original 18 friends, and a small, rusted spark plug from his very first bike. Jax poked his head in, wearing a park manager shirt. "Yo, Mr. Mayor. We got a problem at the track." Max sighed, reaching for his pen. "What now? Budget? Zoning? A noise complaint?" "No," Jax grinned, holding up a pair of goggles. "The new dirt track has a jump that Dante says is unjumpable. He's out there telling the kids it can't be done. We need the boss to go prove him wrong before he ruins the morale." Max looked at the stack of paperwork on his desk, then at the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. He realized that he could be a politician, but he would always be a rider first. The machine of the city needed tending, but so did the spirit of the park. Chapter 25, The Sunset Ride. Max, Leo, Dante, Jax, Manny, and Dre lined up at the top of the 3X summit, the highest point in the park. Below them, the lights of the facility flickered on, illuminating the trails like veins of gold through the dark earth. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. They all felt the presence of Kaleb and Malik in the wind that whipped around their helmets. They felt the strength of Momma in the steady, solid ground beneath their tires. "On 3? Dante asked, revving his engine until it screamed a challenge to the night. "On 3, Max agreed, kicking his bike into gear. They took off together. Max felt the front tire lift, the familiar weightlessness washing over him. He wasn't running from anything anymore. He wasn't a fugitive, and he wasn't a locust. He was a man riding toward a future he had built with his own 2 hands and the help of his brothers. As he landed the jump and throttled forward, Max knew that the ride for change would never truly end. It would just keep going, lap after lap, as long as there was a kid with a bike and a dream of a better way to live. The city was finally quiet, not because the bikes had stopped, but because the world was finally listening to their song.